Continuing on with inverse functions. So the first question, can you write the equation, right? Can you write what it's talking about? It says Lynn is comparing the cost of buying cookbooks from different online stores. Always a good idea. Gives you the 4 stores here. It says write an equation to represent the total cost at each store. So let's use T as it says for cost. So they're all going to be T equals. And how much is it going to be if I buy N cookbooks? So the first one, $9 a piece, free shipping. How am I going to write an equation for that?
Equals 9.
That'd be $9 for no matter how many cookbooks I get. Yeah, 9 times how many cookbooks I get. So 9N. Remember, N is how many cookbooks I'm buying. How about if they are $9 each and $5 for shipping?
9N plus 5.
So same price as before, but adding $5 to it. How about if we don't really know the dollars? It's P dollars. So then it would work for any fee.
PN plus 5.
And still the $5 for shipping. And how about if we change it one more time to F, PN plus 5. Yeah, again, a review here. Write an equation to represent the total cost, so that is your output as a function of, and that is your input. So number of cookbooks is your input, cost is your output. All right, so how about if we switch that to find the number of books you could buy? So now they're all going to be N equals, right? N equals, so we need to solve for N. So store A. How do I solve this for N? Well, I got to get rid of the 9. What's the opposite of times 9? Divide by 9. So that would be the inverse of store A, equation A. Okay, store B. A little different now because I have a plus sign. If I'm going to solve this for N, first thing I need to do is get rid of the 5. How do I get rid of a plus 5? You subtract it. And now, just like before, I got to get rid of the 9, the times 9. The opposite of times 9 is divide by 9. There would be your inverse for B. Okay, some people struggle with, do I divide by 9 first? Do I subtract? Well, if you're solving for N, you gotta get rid of that 5 first. Yes, Caleb.
Weren't your signs flip sides, or does it not really matter? I guess it doesn't really matter because they both equal N.
Right. I prefer writing N equals, but I'm leaving it on the right. C. T equals Pn plus 5. Again, solving for N. Gotta subtract that 5 first. Get rid of the 5. And then you divide by P. Yeah, it was P times N. The opposite of that is dividing by P. You notice they're all following the same pattern. This one I wrote down wrong. That should be an F. Didn't listen to Georgia like I should have. T equals Pn plus F. First step. Minus F. Divide by P. So every one of those was the exact same problem.
Will there be different ones in our lesson?
Hopefully. All right, so the problem you had on the warm-up was a nice easy one, just subtract or add 273.15 to go from Celsius to Kelvin. If it gives you Celsius, you add 273.15. If it gives you Kelvin, you subtract 273.15. When it has two operations, it gets a little more tricky. Okay, as you know, Celsius and Fahrenheit are quite a bit different. So here's the formula to calculate Fahrenheit degrees if it gives you Celsius. So bring your calculator out. And if you prefer a decimal, you can take 9 divided by 5 and get a decimal here. Okay, so we could also write it as, I'm going to take 1.8 times the Celsius and then add 32 degrees to it. They mean the same thing. So we're going to answer the first part, and then we're going to have to write an inverse equation to do the second half of this. When it gives me Fahrenheit, now what do I do? So the first three, plug in these numbers for Celsius. So 1.8 times 0 plus 32. Probably shouldn't need a calculator for 1.8 times 0. And then add 32 to it. 32. So 0 degrees Celsius, where water freezes, is our 32 degrees that we use in Fahrenheit. How about if it's 100? 1.8 times 100. Let's see, plus 32. 212. That is where water boils on the Celsius and Fahrenheit scale. 25 times 1.8 plus 32. Probably the first one you need a calculator for. 77. All right. We're going to come back to the next one because I want an equation for it first. So here's our equation. Again, you can use 1.8 if you prefer decimals. Otherwise, you take it times 9 plus, or divided by 5. So I need to solve this for C. So what do I have to do first? What do I got to get rid of?
32.
How do I get rid of a positive 32?
Subtract.
So I got to subtract 32 from both sides. And then divided by 1.8. Notice it is the whole thing divided by 1.8. Now, if you would have left that a fraction, it would have been divided by 9/5 or times 5/9. So those two equations mean the same thing, depending on if you like the fraction or decimal. So I'm going to write that again on the previous page here to help me. I have to take my Fahrenheit minus 32 and then take whatever that is divided by 1.8 to get Celsius. And that's what you're going to have to do to those three. So see if you can do all three of them. Subtract 32 and then divide by 1.8. Should have three answers. Caleb got one?
Yeah. 40.
Anybody confirm? Alicia, you got one?
Oh, 10.
This one? Last one, Amy?
I don't have.
17? Okay, now the good thing is, anytime you have a Fahrenheit Celsius question, the formulas will be the same, you have them. Okay, so just don't have to resolve it or anything. The equation for Fahrenheit, equation for Celsius is always the same. All right, we are going to go now into question 4 on page 256.
Like, you would give them stamp cards?
Question 4 on 256.
Okay.
At a party, hexagonal tables are placed side by side along one side as shown. Explain why this number represents the number of seats available. S is a number of seats. N is a number of tables. Okay, so where is the 4 coming from? Where is the 2 coming from?
4 tables? Or like something with per table?
So seats is 4 seats and 2 tables.
Oh, seats, yeah, are 4 per table plus 2. This, you should just tell us the answer.
4 seats per table, and then there's 2 extra seats on the ends because they're not close by another table.
Yeah, so every time you add a table, how many seats are you adding? 4. People can sit here or here every time you add a table, right? So if I'm adding another one on here, there will be a new spot here, 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 and here. You're adding 4 spots. So 4 people at each table.
Well, technically,
And then the end ones. Have an extra seat. Okay, so the domain. Wants to know the domain. Domain, remember, is your input. So that is the number of tables in this case. So what makes sense for the number of tables?
Let's go with 5.
What numbers work?
any number besides
Any.
negative number? Well, and 0.
How about 2.5?
Oh,
Oh,
has to be integers of 1.
Integers above 0.
That I was one.
Or you could just say whole numbers.
Whole numbers above.
Whole numbers is 0 and anything positive. Point is no decimals, no fractions. That is a domain.
Anything more. than just a whole number.
The range. The output. In this case, it would be number of seats.
Anything above 6? The whole numbers.
Yeah, if you're filling a table, it would be multiples of 4. It doesn't really say we're doing that, though. But we could say multiples of 4. And then adding 2 to it. Doesn't specify that they are a full. Okay, so if the number of seats is 4 times the number of tables plus 2, let's solve that for n. Let's write the inverse. So I need to solve it for n. So what is the first thing I gotta kick out of the right side?
The 2.
How do I get out of, or get rid of a plus 2? So s minus 2, subtract 2 from both sides. And then I got one more thing to get rid of that's next to the n.
Over.
So right now it's 4 times n, the opposite of times 4 is divide by 4, so I gotta take both sides divided by 4. So if I want the number of seats, I'm gonna use this one. If I want the number of tables, I'm gonna use this one. So question number 4. How many tables are needed? 94 people. So I want the number of tables, that's this one.
92.
So I'm gonna do 94 minus 2 divided by 4.
23.
So I need 23 tables. $95 people. 23.25, so I will need,
23. Or 24.
I would need 24 tables. Okay, what is the domain and range of the inverse? Well, they should switch, right? So now the domain is the opposite of what we wrote for number 2. Domain is number of seats. Now, number of seats does not have to be multiples of 4, clearly, since it gave us 95, it didn't come out nice. So maybe any whole number? I guess you could say it has to be more than 0, otherwise you wouldn't need any tables. But you're not gonna have a half a person, so we gotta say it can't be a decimal. Then range is the opposite, that is the number of tables. So what is possible for the number of tables? Have a fraction?
No.
Decimal? So any whole number for that as well? Both, obviously, whole numbers mean no negatives, no fractions, no decimals. Summary on page 257 there tells you a review of how to get from a regular function to solving for the other one and then getting the inverse function. If you can do that, you should be able to answer any of the questions. Solve for the opposite variable. Again, getting a little more complex than we had yesterday was just one function. These have 2. Multiply and then plus 30. So we gotta get rid of that 30 and then divide it. So it's not as simple as just the opposite operation when you have more than one. Because the order is important when you do these. All right, so let's take a look at the homework. Okay, it gives us an equation there. Asks us some questions for the first 3. For D, it says write an equation that represents C as a function. So you're going to solve this original equation for C. E is the opposite. You're going to solve the original equation for A. Question number 2, it gives you both equations. You just got to make sure you plug in the number where it's supposed to go. Okay, does it go in for P? Does it go in for N? What equation do I use? I think you can handle that. Question 3. 4 is multiple choice. 4 says select all. 5, find the domain and range. Okay, find the domain and range. What numbers would work for the domain, the input? What numbers would work for the range, the output? Six could have a little bit of varying little story here that you're going to write. What happened to our attendance at the game? Okay. What happened to attendance at the game? Cowboys-Viking game. Attendance went down in a hurry the second half. If you remember that one, Caleb. Okay, what's the domain, what's the range? Domain, range. Okay, a lot of these are very similar. 7, review. 8, just answering from the graph. So those 8 questions for today. 258 to 261. If you have a question on something stumps you, got quite a bit of time to get started on it, just let me know. So 1 through 8 for tomorrow.